Salutations from space and aloha from Earth. This is Gemini Brett of More Than Astrology and the Storytelling Podcast, and Gary Caton of Dream Astrologer and the Hermetic Astrology Podcast. You can find us online, morethanastrology.com, or Gary at dreamastrologer.com. And check out our podcast if you'd like to find more of our free sharing. And that's what this is about. This is Standing Rock Astrology. This is episode 3. Here is a rose for you to smell. All right. And in the last episode, we started looking at the natal chart or the world chart for the Standing Rock reservation. And we looked at the Taurus sun and the Leo moon. So you can see that in episode 2 of this series, and episode 1 of sharing our intentions, introducing ourselves a little bit, but also introducing why we're doing this. And just want to state about that as well. We talked a little bit in the last episode about fate and free will. So we'll see as we honor the history after we introduce the natal concepts or the birth chart for Standing Rock. We'll look at through the history a little bit and see some of the astrological alignments and see how they speak to some of the changes and broken treaties and initiations and these kinds of things that have gone down. And then our intent is to look ahead a little bit and look into next year, since it's really getting hot out there right now. And then we'll talk about the difference between predictive and productive. Gary mentioned last time we can do very fatalistic techniques astrologically. There's something in some times where that serves and sometimes where it doesn't. So we are here to be careful and to walk lightly and with the earth and not tread on her. All right. Gary, how you doing, brother?
I'm all right, man. How you doing?
I'm doing well with this Astro Marathon. I always enjoy it, and it's so nice to share my thoughts and to do that in such wise company, because my intent always when I teach is to learn, and it's a lot easier to do so when you are on the horn. So thank you for being here.
Right on. Thank you for the honor, and again, it's wonderful to be here and be able to do something to stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters out there at Standing Rock, and to speak about their cause and to promote awareness about their cause. Not just because it is really our cause too, right? We all need water, but because they deserve it. First and foremost, they deserve for their treaties to be honored. They deserve for their lives to be honored. Native lives matter, right? And so it's an honor to be here saying that, and of course, even more special when I get to do it with my buds.
Yeah, man. Well, so this is the world chart here, and I guess for the sake of y'all who are new to astrology, again, I'm going to bring up the decoder ring in the chart, and I will shrink our faces for a second. So there you go. And last time, so you could take a screenshot of this if you want to save it and be able to refer to it. So we're starting again by kind of breaking this thing down. We're going to look at this as a birth chart, as a natal chart for a Standing Rock, and see if that can help us connect to the energy of these people, of this movement that's very much rooted right now and shining through the light of this tribe, of this situation. Yeah. So to call attention and to just honor the essence and the being that is shown here in the soul song. All right. So last time we broke it down and we looked only at the moon and the sun. And we talked about horse and buffalo. I wanted to bring in this rose again, which is such a Taurus deal. I mean, this bloomed in my garden just last week.
Wow.
In October, which is pretty amazing. And I think it also brings me into this intent that in service to both the eagle of the north and the condor of the south, that we can honor that even in our autumn, flowers can bloom. And this, I think, is tying me to the folks in the southern hemisphere where they are enjoying the spring of spring as we are falling into the fall.
Yeah.
So we talked about sun and moon. We talked a bit about this square aspect The tension, we talked about the planets of these two luminaries and mutual reception. You can find all of that in episode 2. And when we look at the moon and sun, we also have to honor the lunar nodes. These strange things that in the Vedic tradition, they called Rahu, the head of the dragon, and Caton, the tail of the dragon or the tail of the serpent. That language has been used in many traditions. And people are working with the nodes archetypally, astrologically in different ways. But first I wanted just to talk about what they are astronomically and what we can see just by seeing how close to the north node in Virgo this Leo moon is, when you know what the nodes do. So here's just a quick image. And I'm going to open a program here as well to describe the nodes. So the idea is that the ecliptic, or the path of the sun in our sky, is defined by the Earth-Sun plane. Or as the Earth orbits the sun, from a geocentric perspective, the sun orbiting the Earth, there's a plane, yeah? And it's like a flat plane. For the most part, the planets of the solar system live on that same plane, but not exactly. And the moon varies by 5 degrees because the moon is orbiting what? The Earth, not the sun. And so there's a point where the moon can be, from our point of view, above the path of the sun, and at other points below the path of the sun. It maxes out about 5 degrees above or 5 degrees below. And this happens every month, that the moon crosses from above to below at the descending or the south node, and then reaches its lowest peak, which I like to call the dragon's belly. It's also called the southern bending of the moon, comes back up at the dragon's head or the ascending node, and then peaks maybe at the dragon's back, the northern bending, before it goes back down again. So I love to show this personally with Pluto. Now this is one of the reasons why Pluto was kind of demoted to a dwarf planet by the whitecoats, as I like to call them recently. And it's because Pluto has...
A small sect of the whitecoats.
One sect of the whitecoats, thank you. And it's because Pluto has such a funky orbit. So check, this is our solar system. This is a really fun program called Solar System Scope, which you can play with online for free, solarsystemscope.com. And what you're seeing is this relatively flat plane of our solar system. Now, it's not entirely flat. Every planet has their own path. None of them are equal to the Earth-Sun plane, which is called the ecliptic. But this is like Pluto gets way up here and way, way down here. I mean, I can send Pluto all the way into Gary's face right now if you're sitting the cameras where I do. And it's very interesting at this time, 2017, 2016, I think it'll be 2017, 2018 exactly, that Pluto comes here and reaches, he's descending node, okay? Because this is Pluto crossing from above the ecliptic, above the path of the sun, to below, yeah? And Pluto has a 268-year orbit. So this only happens twice every 268 years. That's pretty significant. For the moon, it happens every month. The moon will descend at the descending node and ascend at the ascending node. So one thing I'd like to just say again to honor both hemispheres and this fall flower is that the northern hemisphere's ascending node, okay, where the moon comes from below to above, is the southern hemisphere's descending node. Because when you look at the sky down there, the whole zodiac is flipped upside down from our point of view. So for us, a high moon will equal for them a low moon, or a moon that's close to Earth. And for me, symbolically, more and more, the sun represents spirit, great mystery, the key of the song, where the moon reflecting that key, in a way, the greatest chance to see the most light without going blind, it is soul. So spirit and soul. And where I can dig into the idea that's often used in many modern astrological paradigms of the south node being where we come from, well, that's because that's, for me now, where soul is descending past the line of spirit down to Earth. However, that's flipped in the southern hemisphere, so we'll speak about that maybe a little bit. But I want to show where this is in the sky at the time of April 29th, 1868, this chart that we're working with for Standing Rock. And then we'll talk about a south node in Pisces and a north node in Virgo, and rather close to the ecliptic but slightly southern latitude for the moon. All right, there was a gazillion word sentence, Gary. Do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, these points where the moon crosses the Earth's plane, of course, we call that plane the ecliptic because these are also the points where we find eclipses, right? Because the sun and the moon and the Earth have to be aligned in 3 dimensions, right, in order for there to be an eclipse. An eclipse is actually the Earth's shadow falling on the face of the moon, or the moon's shadow falling on the face of the Earth. So these are also places where we get eclipses. This is why we have the Vedic myth of the dragon, because it was thought that there was a dragon that swallowed the sun or the moon when this happened. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And many dragon myths you see in serpent myths with the moon and the sun, because if you think of the path of the sun as a straight line, every month the moon is snaking above and below. In China as well, we heard about the dragon eating the sun at the time of a solar eclipse. And we've heard also about the death of the king in some of the older traditions, where the sun often was seen as the king, right?
Yeah.
Or in the Vedic tradition, we don't want to go into the full story now, but Rahu, the head of the serpent, had been decapitated. So when he eats the sun, he's taking revenge against Surya. It then comes out of his decapitated neck, right? So the solar eclipse, it doesn't go around for that long. But yeah, that's the very important thing about these crossing points. Like, we have a new moon every month, right? We just had one yesterday. In fact, we're recording today's November 1st, 2016. And it wasn't a solar eclipse. Why? The moon and the sun align every time there's a new moon. Well, from Earth's point of view, yesterday the moon was above the sun so far that it didn't line up and block the light. Yeah, so the sun and the moon either have to meet as a new moon at either of the nodes for us to have a solar eclipse, or as a full moon near either of the nodes for us to experience a lunar eclipse, as Gary was just explaining. So the nodes have that important essence. I mean, there's that, for me, the coming together of soul and spirit, or moon and sun, the great luminaries. They're really imaginary points in space. But since eclipses are periodic and can be tracked due to a regular frequency, the ancients, I mean, like far back, were tracking these points called the nodes. So now if we look at this chart, and we see that the moon, you see the moon, let me just, I'll bring in what's called a transit chart, and I can move this through the days here a little bit. So last time we looked back to the new moon before the Standing Rock chart, okay, which was some 7 days before, 1 week before, new moon in Taurus. All right, and now the moon, I'm just going to go by days. The moon is moving through the signs this way. The moon will rise in the east and set in the west, like everything on the zodiac, but zodiacally, day after day, it's going to move through the signs, and nothing moves faster than the moon. So it moves through Taurus, then into Gemini, then into Cancer, Leo, and this is where it was at the time. And then when it gets to Virgo, this in the northern hemisphere is the ascending node. So that is where the moon ascends from below the path of the sun to above. And we can just tell in that sense that because this is where the moon came down from above to below, and it hasn't quite gotten from below to above, this is what's called a southern latitude moon, or the moon's closer to Earth. And Gary, please add to that, because I'm going to bring up Stellarium and show this, but I've got to push some buttons to be able to make that happen.
Right, so this is literally the place where the moon crosses the Earth plane, right? So this is the place where the moon's orbit intersects with the Earth's orbit. So it's the place where the moon's frequency, if you will, or the moon's essence, is most available to the Earth plane, right? It's their interface point, if you will. And so there's even though it's just a point in space, it's like a crossroads. It's like a place where we can point to where there's a juicy intersection of energies. It's like a particularly fertile valley, if you want, of moon energy that is coming into, that is sort of an upwelling of lunar energy, if you will.
Yes, I will. And so to show this in space, here we go again on the chart. And this is a sunrise chart, as we mentioned in the first episode. The sun is rising on the eastern horizon. And I can bring in all the other planets, and we'll see Mercury and Mars and Jupiter who had risen before the sun, Saturn on its way to set. At the time of the sunrise, the moon was actually way down below the ground, which is this horizontal line on an astrology chart. So here it is at the time of sunrise on April 29th, 1868. This, by the way, is West Coast time, so don't worry about the hours. And here we can see Mercury, Mars, and Jupiter had risen. Saturn is on his way to setting. And I'm just going to cruise through the hours. There's Saturn setting. Here's Jupiter and culminating. Here's midday when the sun reaches what's called the midheaven. And now we've seen the moon rise. And so for this, let me just show you see how the moon is below or closer to the Earth than the path of the sun, which is this red line, the Earth-Sun plane, the ecliptic. Okay, the next day, the moon came and was just coming up to the path of the sun. See that? So 2 days later, on May 1st, modern Beltane, or May Day, the moon is crossing the ecliptic. And if we go back again a couple days before, it was lower. So now we see that the moon is ascending above, and see that how quickly it gets above. After about a week, because that's the amount of time, we'll just look at the moon and the nodes again. Here's the moon 2 days later, crossing from below to above. And about a week later, when it gets what's called square the nodes, the moon is at its maximum peak, or the northern bending of the dragon's back, and about a week later, it comes back below when it crosses at the dragon's tail, or the descending node. So that's just what the nodes are in space, and many of you watching this already know that, but some of you don't, and we really like to teach as we share. So there's the deal there. Now, we looked last time at the, well, Gary, let me just actually, before I go on, I should ask you, is there a general description that you give for a moon below the path of the sun? So a southern latitude.
Right, southern latitude. So if you think about it in terms of this daily journey that we based our chart on, right? Remember, we don't know when they actually signed the treaty, that is, what time of day. So we used the beginning point of the day, which is the time when the sun pierces the horizon, yeah? We used a node, a kind of node, an interface point between the sun and the horizon as our beginning point. So the sun pierces the horizon. We have the sun above the horizon for a while, and then the sun pierces the horizon at what we call sunset, right? We can think about it also in terms of the seasonal qualities. The sun crosses the equator going north in the spring, right? And then Taurus is the middle of spring, Leo is the height of summer. So there's generally speaking, north is interpreted as an intake of energy, right? In the northern hemisphere during the spring and summer, there's more solar energy to be absorbed by the earth and by the people on the earth, or with the earth, excuse me. And in the winter, there's less solar energy available. So there's a release of energy. So generally speaking, a south latitude you can also think of it in terms of the hero or heroine's journey, right? The first part of the journey, the hero or heroine has to find out who they are, what their special gifts are. In the First Nations context, they call this medicine, yeah? And I don't mean to put those quotes as in any kind of question, just putting it in context of that's what they call what we're talking about. Your personal contribution to the tribe is called medicine. And you have a very unique medicine that only you can give to the tribe, right? And so, but you have to find that. You have to go out on vision quest, right, to find that medicine. And then when you come back and you tell your vision to the elder says, this is very important, and they help you find out what it means. And then later, you serve the tribe with that medicine. You do what's best for the tribe using this personal medicine that you've discovered. Yeah. So a south latitude planet is more about giving that medicine back and service to the collective than it is in finding that special medicine. It's already found out who it is. Now it wants to give back and share with the collective.
Right. So a way people work with South Node and North Node, and it's kind of more of a modern thought, not necessarily when you look into medical astrology, which is a rich tradition back to the Renaissance. They were working in a way with like North is what's coming in and South is what you know and what you're kind of excreting. They've been seen differently in many different ways, but the modern astrological look is you come from your South Node and you go to your North Node. Again, for me, I struggle with that a little bit just personally because I can dig it with the soul coming down to earth through the path of spirit, but that's the South Node in the Northern Hemisphere and the North Node in the Southern Hemisphere. So when I do consultations with Southern Hemisphere people, there's this whole 20-minute thing where I just express how confused I am about the whole trip. The nodes haven't been worked with in that regard for too long. There's some traditions where they were both kind of just seen as a source of Maya or illusion. And if you think about it, that makes sense because what is a solar eclipse? Now, first of all, for me, just energetically, it's this opportunity we have in the Earth game where we can see that soul and spirit are the same size. And also that soul, if I can allow myself to use moon and sun this way as I do, that soul is closer to us than spirit. And I love that symbolism. There's a whole YouTube movie I put up called Dancing with Duality, where I show this with a compass and a square in sacred geometry. So check that out if you would like. But there's something very important to me about, regardless of what hemisphere I'm in, knowing the difference here and being able to see just on this chart, because the moon had not yet reached the ascending node that it's below, there's something about that moon being down to earth. And I love this because Gary shared in many ways last time how we have, okay, this Taurus sun, but it's aligned to the Ram. We have this Leo moon, but it's aligned to the Crab. We've also, and so there's these ways where two energies are coming in. We could also say, and we didn't talk about this last time, but Taurus traditionally is an earth sign or a feminine sign, and the sun was often seen as solar. And then the Leo is like a masculine sign, fire sign, traditionally speaking, and the moon was seen as lunar or feminine, right? So there's a beautiful exchange there. But one thing I just love to show in the sky again is that because this is a southern expression for the moon, it puts it in this claw of the crab. Because if it was a northern latitude moon, it could be anywhere like up here, depending on where the nodes are. And we talked about the crab's claw last time and how that might even play into a little bit of like snipping treaties. I could really see it in that way, and the crab moving sideways. And Gary mentioned the beautiful place where the light reaches the oceans and life comes forth. So you can look at episode 2 for that. But I want to show one more thing, is that where this North Node is, you can see again that on May 1st, this would have been the time in 1868 when the moon was ascending from below to above. So this is the ascending node, and it's very close to this bright star, Zosma. It's between Regulus, the heart of the lion, which we'll see come in a few different ways, and also Denebola, the tail of the lion. So we can see the ascending node is right here with the constellation of the lion. And that brings to us some information as well, yeah?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you know, I don't know that the African lion, you know, necessarily has so much to say about two or four indigenous people, but there is a lion here as well, yeah. The mountain lion or the puma or the cougar, and lion energy is it's solitary in terms of North America. They don't. It's not necessarily like an African lion. So it's interesting in that respect. In that most of the skirmishes between in Red Cloud's War were like they were just small bands of Indians who would excuse me, there I go again, of First Nation people who would have encounters with various. There was this thing called the Bozeman Trail, like where the white people were trying to get up and into this country for various reasons, and it resulted in clashes between, you know, small groups of red people and small groups of white people. So you can kind of see that lion energy there, I think, a little bit in terms of the North American lion. But this idea of, again, this very fierce and very proud and very strong and intimidating, in fact, presence, where the moon is making this, you know, intersection point. I mean, to me, it speaks very clearly to to a deep presence within the Lakota people. They were very fierce warriors and very proud people, and you know, I think that's maybe why the United States has had a history of such shady dealings with them, right? Because, you know, they were a little too strong for us to really deal with them on honest terms.
Right, honest or honorable terms. And so what happens, it's like, oh, we'll concede your wishes, here's these lands, and now
Yeah, and then
your food.
a couple of years from now, we'll back out and
right.
try
And
to
so
do
we'll be
something
looking at
different.
that as time goes along. And again, when we honor as time goes along in these charts, and don't just see the frame, but zoom out and see the scene, this is something where we can see like that moon's movement. And it's very interesting to me that on that way of the ascending path of the moon, which is kind of like a promise of this chart, because we can see that that's where the moon will go here in the next couple of days. Before it can ascend from the below to the above, it starts close to Earth and it's rising to the heavens. And on the way there, it's going to like contact the heart of the lion, Regulus, this magical star that speaks about honor and all of these themes. And then it's going to come up above and meet the nebula, which has a history of revolution and rebellion.
Yeah.
And I think all of these themes even play in. And so this is part of being a sky astrologer or an experiential astrologer, a shamanic astrologer. I like to call it earthstrology, is that we engage not only with the academic and the intellectual power of astrology, but where these things are happening in the sky and how they are moving and what they are doing. Yeah. So
Right.
Gary mentioned before, I mean, one of the most powerful things about, I just realized I was interrupting myself by saying that we only have eclipses every twice a year about, that's because the sun and the moon have to meet at the nodes, and the nodes move very slowly, and they move traditionally retrograde or backwards through the zodiac. But what I was saying before I mentioned that was that the nodes each were kind of seen as these places of illusion, because a solar eclipse, we know it is an illusion that we see the moon is the same size as the sun. They're very, very different things. And it's amazing, and I think it's clear evidence of creation that we see the moon and the sun as the same size from Earth at times.
It's a miracle, right?
It is an absolute miracle and one of the most fascinating, energies to participate with. And there is a total solar eclipse coming to the United States for the first time since the mid-70s on August 21st, 2017. And what I intend to show you is that the two solar eclipses next year, 2017, one in Pisces, February 26th, 2017, I believe, and one in Leo, August 21st, 2017, will bring this standing rock chart back to life in a very powerful way, because eclipses are definitely about power. They're definitely about a unique experience, and they are definitely about shadow, and hopefully about bringing the light forth from the shadow. Gary, I first heard this term, the golden shadow, from you on one of the recent Sky Astrology conference sharings. Could you just speak to that, please?
Right. Well, I mean, in many ways, the North Node in the Lion would speak to a golden shadow. Essentially, shadow material is everything we are not capable of holding in our awareness. So that oftentimes we will take things that we're not proud of. For instance, do we go around every single day telling everybody, oh, by the way, you know, we don't honor our treaties with indigenous people? You know, no, we would rather not talk about that. So that kind of stuff will be pushed down below awareness, and we'll talk about all the stuff that we are proud of, right? So shadow typically is thought of as negative traits that we're not proud of, that we want to sort of tuck away and forget about and not think about or not speak about. But if there's part of us that is very powerful, so powerful in fact that we are afraid to claim it, then that can also be tucked away and not talked about, right? That's what I mean by golden shadow. It's something that is ultimately positive, that will ultimately serve the collective. But in our fear of it overpowering us and of losing ourselves through expressing it, we repress it, you know. Or we oppress it in this case.
Yeah, suppression isn't only conducted by outside forces, right? And sometimes actually there's that beautiful golden shadow. It's like sometimes it's best to hold on to that ace card until you're ready to play it, until you have the right hand, yeah? So sometimes we cultivate these powers in the hidden realms, and then we can bring them out to the light of consciousness. And so shadow doesn't have to be negative, but we do our shadow work, and we honor some of, you know, our mishaps and our programs and whatever. I mean, you did this beautifully just minutes ago, Gary. You said, oh, there I go again, because I said Indians. Well, we were raised on cowboys and Indians, you know.
Right.
And and even in DC, there's the Museum of the National Museum of the American Indian, right? George Bush, we mentioned today, November 1st, 2016, we're entering the month, American Indian Month, right? And so we heard from the First Nations and from the true first Americans, the indigenous Americans, that they don't want to be called Indians. This isn't India. And yet here's this museum, supposedly here to like pay tribute to them, or this month, called Indian. It's a very strange thing. And this is a way that we'll slip up, but being conscious of that, not hiding from it. This is part of what we're trying to do here and share here. Yeah. So Gary, what's your vibe generally? Just like if you saw on a chart, South Node in Pisces, North Node in Virgo, does that speak to water medicine? As you,
of course, yeah. The South Node represents that place where we, right? If the northern latitude is about finding our medicine, then the South Node is that place where we let go of the search for medicine and begin to search and how to apply that medicine, how to give back. So the South Node is really an interface point that speaks to a very powerful medicine that we can bring in service to the North Node. Yeah. So yeah, there you go, Pisces, right? It's the power of the ocean. And think about it for a second. As far as we know, and again, this is as far as we know, and I use air quotes to be ironic in this case. Because we don't know that much, and we're probably wrong about this. But as far as we know, the First Nation people came from Asia across the land bridge, right? They crossed the Pacific Ocean to get here. Yeah. So there you go, the South Node in Pisces.
I think there's a good chance that they also crossed the ocean, South Node in Pisces, and that if we listen to their stories, some of them actually came north from the south. But yeah, so Pisces as well. So one thing about it is, in its medicine and its power. I mean, I like to just consider it the spirit of water itself.
Yes.
I mean, that's what Standing Rock's about. You know, it's not only that, but for me, where Cancer, we talked about this a bit last, with like where the sun is gracing the surface of the ocean, new life sprouts forth, there's creation, and for me it's like the other's water. Scorpio, the deep depths, you know, and that transformation, that power, that fix sign, that fix myself to fix the world, living authentically instead of serving the suppressed to control me. I will control the expressed to serve me. This is the power, the transformational quality of that serpent Scorpio that comes back, from the darkness into the light. But Pisces is the spirit of the water. It is just the all waters. Like, I'm drinking this amazingly flavored water right now, some pu'er tea, and there's like Genghis Khan piss in this. You know what I'm saying? Like, we are all connected. It's been everywhere. It's a closed loop. And also when we look at like the work of Masaru Emoto and the hidden messages in water and the truth that we can consciously connect to water, and with our prayer, we can literally shift the molecules of water. I mean, this was known age old in the traditions of Hawaii, which I've had some fortune in being able to sit with some of their elders and hear their teachings about this. The natives speak about this without a doubt. Like, the water holds memory, it holds prayer, and it connects us all. We are made of water. Our world is water. And to see the South Node in Pisces like this will say this is a rich tradition where the medicine of water is well known. Yeah. And when we look to the chart too, like we said, using the sunrise chart, we're going to like be a little sensitive about the places or the houses, but not entirely so. And Gary said, no, we're all right. This is, regardless of which house system I use here, we're talking about an 11th sign or 11th place, Pisces, South Node. And so what about the 11th, Gary?
Right. The 11th is usually considered a house of friendship, of shared creativity, a place where different kinds of people can come together in solidarity towards a group purpose, right? So, like, how beautiful is that? That there's literally this coming together of different kinds of people in this treaty, both Native people and European Americans. But then there's this wonderful coming together around this idea that of mini wikani, water is life.
Yes. And
you can't, we're not going to let you take this very last thing from us. We're going to make a stand. And when I say we, I mean all the nations are coming together. Yeah. There's a cohesive quality about water where it holds things together, right? Moistness, in terms of as a philosophical principle, is cohesiveness, right? It's unity. It's unity. And that's the beautiful thing about what's happening at Standing Rock. Is you hear people all the time. President Barack Obama talked about unity in his speeches. Did we see any of that from the white people? No. But the First Nations people are showing us what it looks like. They are coming together in unity.
That's a great example to bring in Barack Obama and say, did we see this from the white people? This isn't just about white people. Yeah, I mean, so here's a very clear example. Now we are talking about people who want to reconnect to the wisdom of the earth. Yeah, and so let's just say that is an indigenousness. Yeah, and so that even some of our tribes, as we're awakening and we're listening to the dreams and the animals, and we're learning this in our own way, and some of us have had the great fortune and honor to have teachings from the elders of indigenous people, but some of us are just also stumbling into this intuitively and through our dreams because we've chosen to give ourselves in service to the earth. Yeah. And that verse, we could say the money people and the corporation people. So the 11th house, I mean, also our team, our tribe, are people who are of like mind, who are here in a revolutionary way to change the world. Yeah. And so I love this South Node in Pisces here, because again, it confirms for us that this chart that we're honoring in this way, to sense into Standing Rock and into this movement, into this time, speaks, because this is what is bringing us together, all of us together. Water doesn't have boundaries. You need cups to keep water separate from itself. It merges, it connects. Yeah. And so this
that's why it's so important to protect the water, right? Because it doesn't have boundaries, because it is so omnipresent. Yeah, it's in the ground, it's in the air. It's if you don't protect it, if you don't hold strong boundaries, then it will become polluted. And if you put a pipeline next to a major water source, eventually it will become polluted. It's common sense.
A water source that feeds 10 million people, and it's the land and it's the water itself. So, right, coming together in this way, and this revolution, and again, Pisces revolution. So we're not going to fight with swords and guns. We're going to fight with an open heart and a true prayer and connectivity. And also, I should share this, because one of my astrology teachers, you, taught me this about the traditional view of the 11th as also being a financial house of how other people's money comes to us. So now we can talk about that later, maybe with the history, and how part of the treaty was that natives would be paid. And then once the buffalo were killed, there were also food rations, and that's been a whole part of this thing. But what I would say about this is that we all have an opportunity now to assist this movement, even if we can't be there in presence, with prayer. Like the water literally hears you, and with money, right? There are a lot of places where you could send some money and support these people. So we just really encourage you to do that. That's what we're here to do. It's to spread awareness.
Yeah, you can make phone calls. You can sit in prayer. You can make phone calls to your representatives. You can send money. You can post about it on Facebook. There's many things you can do to assist and to be part of this 11th house group. To be a part, solidarity. The idea of solidarity is an 11th house thing, and it's a very powerful thing, right? Because the powers that be, and again, I do use this ironically in this case, the powers that be, because guess why? They are not the powers that be. You see, the power is in us. We, the people, meaning white people, black people, red people, yellow people, all the people, we are more than any of these so-called powerful people. We're many more. You see, that is also a lesson of Pisces, that unity amongst diverse people, right? Because Pisces is a mutable sun. Unity amongst diverse people is the ultimate power. That and through unity we can reclaim our sovereignty. You see, they have to listen to us once again if we can come together in solidarity. So yeah, I mean, it's just amazing how this chart speaks.
So, and Pisces as well is a very mystical, transcendent. I mean, traditionally the last on the wheel of life when it begins with Aries at the resurrection spring. Yeah. So there's the Bodhisattva cause as well. I choose to come back around until all find their enlightenment. Yeah, there's compassion. There's that feeling the wound, that feeling the suffering, that we are all one. I am he is she, and something about a walrus. Yeah, Lenin saying, I think, right? So this interconnection. But there's also in Pisces, and we'll speak about the alcohol, I think, as we move forward. There's also delusion. There's also so mystical that nobody understands what the heck I'm trying to say. I feel that sometimes, so poetic, so spiritual. And there's something about that here too, right? Because here comes this Western mind, this ownership mind, this separation mind. How can we even comprehend that we are all one, that we are the land? You don't own the land. The land owns you. There's no ownership, and there's no mine and yours. It's art, And so there's that thing too in the Pisces South Node, where it can not, I wouldn't say get hung up, but be in a place where, because people don't get it, it can be a challenge. When we look at Chiron and Pisces as we move forward, we'll see some of that there. When we look at the the larger kind of seen essences of the Aries, Mercury, and Mars in this chart, but where they came from, we'll see there. And when we look to the prenatal solar eclipse in Pisces, we'll definitely see that too. But before I go there, what about a 5th house North Node in Virgo, Gary?
Right. So it's interesting that these people who sort of came from another area, right? There's this fluidity amongst the First Nations to begin with, which I think speaks to the Pisces. This fluidity, not just in where they live, but in how they live. They just got up on horses and created a whole nother way of life for themselves, you know? This fluidity all of a sudden becomes contained in an earth sign. The earth is the boundaries, the earth is the structure. So these people, I mean, think about how ironic this is. You take these people who make their living through following the buffalo around. They're migratory people. They live in teepees so that they can pull up. They don't live in houses like you or I do that have foundations, right? They migrate with the animals that they live with. So to take them and all of a sudden say, boom, there's this boundaries, you know, this river on this side and this one, that's your home, right? Like, wait a minute, how do migratory people begin to exist? Well, as we want you to live as farmers, right? You know, so there's this, so it's interesting because, you know, from a new agey point of view, people will say, well, you know, wherever you are, wherever your strength is, it's learning to integrate the opposite of that contains the most growth, right? So there's this idea that the opposite of water, the opposite of something that's fluid and has no boundaries is earth. It is, you know, rigid, strict, you know, hierarchical boundaries. So that on the one hand, it's like we can see how literal that is in the sense that they literally became, you know, they had to live on reservation and become farmers and so forth. But I think in a more archetypal sense, the Virgo speaks to just the really practical wisdom, as I was saying, of, and all earth signs speak to a very practical wisdom of, hey, you know, don't put poison right next to your water and expect it not to mix. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like, duh.
Yes. Yeah. And that forward direction too, and Virgo calling us into what prayer. I mean, Pisces has a prayer, very mystical, kind of the great, you know, I mean, Wankantanka, you know, the great above, the great all, the great creator.
Yeah.
And Virgo coming, I mean, like into Unti, into mother, into the earth, and into our yoga, into our practice, into our devotion. And
Service.
he calling and says, hey, look, people, like, this is your earth too. This is your water too. This is
right.
the land. Come back home, right? And
Yeah.
so 5th house as well, we're talking about that essence of us as creator beings, the inspiration, you know. I mean, for me, the 11th has a lot of imagination and these antennas that connect us to these different people as our team. But
Yeah.
the 5th is so like, it's the inner sun, and it's bringing us down into these roots of the earth, very much in that earth sign. And as Gary said, like, you know, there's this old saying, if it doesn't grow corn, right? So oil in your water does not grow corn.
No.
Literally. It doesn't grow people either. So let's be careful.
Yeah,
and
right.
to honor the movement of the moon as it's coming after this time, it's going to cross Regulus, the heart of the lion, as it comes above. It's going to see Denebula, but then it's going to come into this place above in the maiden of the sky, the priestess, the virgin of the sky. Yeah. And there's so much about that true way of emerging agriculture and connection to the land that is part of the promise moving forward of this chart. And the Taurus sun, I think, a way of transitioning from the nomadic places into this experience with the land, because that's part of what's going down, right? So again, Pisces South Node too, coming from the Great Lakes area. I mean, that's kind of amazing.
Out onto the Great Plains, you know. Yeah, and I mean, you know, you think about Virgo in the 5th house, like a really solid, practical creativity where, you know, we take this, like, we've known for years, like, well, I say we've known. I mean, those who aren't in denial, right, have heard for a while, oh, there's climate change and oh, we have to do something about it. But look, no, we have to make a stand right here at this place. No more will fossil fuels be allowed to trample over people, right? We have to make a stand, and they're showing us how, in a very practical and in a very creative way, how to make, how to change the way that we live on the earth, because they've already done it. You see, they already changed, like you said, from a Great Lakes people to a horse centered culture, and now they're showing us how we can change as a culture, you know, in a very practical and creative way. So, I mean, there again, I think it's really beautiful how this chart does indeed speak.
Tune into Standing Rock now. Today's, again, November 1st, 2016. Things are heating up there. It's not just local police now. There's police from many surrounding areas. The National Guards come in. I mean, armored tanks. It's really heavy. And if we bring our awareness to this, like literally just bringing our awareness to this is a very real and tangible thing. If we spread this word, that's part of our intent here. It's only assisting this cause that's not about some other people. I mean, it is about the people who have been wronged, but it's also about us and the ways that we've been wronged, and not just the ways that we wrong. Yeah, so this is about the water, this is about life, and this is about
how we can save our world, really, man. Because, you know, there are scientists out there saying that not only are we very close to crossing a threshold into the sixth great mass extinction, right? So like when the dinosaurs all died off, that's what's called a mass extinction. I think, you know, if we want to be real Virgo in the technical terms, when 3/4 of the species disappear, that's a mass extinction. And there are scientists out there saying that if we don't do something now, we could cross the threshold in like maybe 20 years where that's going to happen no matter what we do. Okay, that's how important this is. So, you know, first and foremost, the indigenous people, the first people of this land, have a right to be treated as such and be treated as human beings and be honored. And then after we're done with that, maybe by learning how to finally honor our word with them and finally honor them as the amazing beings that they are, maybe we can actually learn how to save our own freaking asses in the process.
Yeah, I mean, the wisdom there is so unique. I mean, I'm very fortunate in a community here where we do have some native elders coming to speak to our communities, like even at the festivals. And there's this awareness of cultural appropriation. I mean, there's symbols of this in my place. I try to be careful, you know. I've been called out for it in Hawaii before. And I say, yeah, cool. I'm glad you brought my awareness to that. And I'm an astrologer. Like my whole business is cultural appropriation. Everything I'm sharing is Roman and Babylonian,
Egyptian or Mesopotamian.
But that's also like the medicines coming together. But if we do that in a right and respectful way, then we open the invitation to receive the wisdom that fortunately was not entirely destroyed or extinct, because an estimated 8 million native people in 1492 were decimated to the point of 250,000, yeah, by 1890 or 1900, okay? And fortunately, we're still alive and the land still speaks and did not, I mean, refused to allow these people to die. I mean, regardless of the atrocities and these kinds of things. So we're going a little bit further afield than necessary, but we're also talking about eclipses. And we're talking about nodes, and nodes tend to be pretty serious. And when we start bringing the aspect theory back in, and this isn't the day for it, we will really speak about how Saturn squaring this nodes, a retrograde Sagittarius Saturn squaring these nodes, is meant to bring some of the challenges that we've seen. And that
and I mean, if you want to broaden your lens for a second here, you know, a lot of people in my generation were born with a very important alignment in Virgo, and that was the most recent Uranus-Pluto conjunctions happened in the sign of Virgo back in the 1960s, right? So that's when a lot of these people, you know, hippie people and New Age people, we started to get the message that the Earth, you know, was not something to be walked on, but walked with, for instance, as you were saying. And we started to get the message that, hey, you know, we've only got one home, man. And it's interesting because that was the very first Uranus-Pluto conjunction not to happen in a fire sign for hundreds of years. So here you got the industrial age, right, burning all this fuel and stuff, and then all of a sudden it shifts to the earth element, and in particular into Virgo, exactly where we find the north node in this chart. And it's like, you know, we need to get that message of what Virgo is about, of being a proper steward, of being a caretaker of the earth rather than an owner of the earth, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And that message really started coming into the modern American, if we want to say that word. I don't know what the euphemism I can to the white person in the mid 60s. And what Gary's speaking about is how Uranus revolution, Pluto evolution came together to plant this new seed or a new moon between these two planets then. And it was Vietnam and it was Sergeant Pepper's, you know, and the hippie.
And it was that blue marble shot, right? The first time that the astronauts saw the Earth from outer space, and they go, "Oh my God, look at that beautiful blue marble." You know, that's our home, and we've only got one.
And the thing is now, this new moon that was planted at that time in the sign of Virgo, and also, by the way, this is when Anipi started coming to the West. I mean, it was already here. I don't know how to express it, but coming to awakening, really hippies were asking to connect to the land. Earth Day was born, and people started sweating. And Lakota started bringing modern or Americans, white people, basically, people from all sorts of cultures, into this rich tradition, which has really blossomed. And we'll look into this for sure in future episodes, because Uranus, Pluto, which were conjunct then in the mid 60s, have recently been, from 2012 to 2015, square to one another. We were looking into the square aspect last time, but this is to say that Pluto in Capricorn and Uranus and Aries have that square, that perpendicularity we were talking to last time. And really speaking about the sprouting of the seeds that were planted then in the mid 60s. And that sprouting ain't easy. You know, you're coming through hard ground, there's waters, there's winds, you know, I mean, so the seed has to go through this growth stage of conflict for the sake of revolution. And we're in that, and no doubt Standing Rock is part of this. And I just love, you know, looking today at how basically Pluto becomes a pretty important planet with the Standing Rock, because the sun was, as it does every year, pretty closely aligned to Pluto. And like literally right now, Gary, we've got this like almost exact Pluto in Capricorn at our current time trining the Standing Rock Pluto.
Yeah.
That, and I think that's probably some of what has called Gary and myself to this quest, into this sharing. But to get back to the nodes.
More about that later.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about Saturn squaring the nodes later too. I think a retrograde Sagittarius Saturn in the 8th house squaring the nodes is a very clear tell in this chart as well.
No, absolutely. I mean, you know, that Saturn is at the north bending of those nodes, right? So that's the place where once the moon crossed in Virgo, then it reaches its point of maximum latitude, right? Maximum height, maximum of like, so this is the hero's journey part of it, where you find the special medicine, right? Before you can come back and share it with anybody, you have to find it. You have to touch God. You have to have that personal conversation with God. That's where this Saturn is at.
Right.
So, yeah, it's a really crucial place.
Most astrologers now are working with South Node, North Node, but many have lost the connection to the bendings. And so on this chart, South Node or descending node Pisces, we come down in the southern bending, the dragon's belly is Gemini, come back up ascending node, the dragon's head in Virgo, and then the peak or the dragon's back or the northern bending is Sagittarius, and the bendings are square the nodes, astrologers. So that's what Gary's saying. Look at the Saturn. Not only is it square the nodes, it's pretty exact, and it's also retrograde, so it's closing back in on the perfect square. So I want to close this out I mean, not too quickly, but to look at the eclipses around this time, because that's going to come in. I've really been studying eclipses hardcore lately. Last time we looked at how, yes, Leo sun, 6th degree, Taurus sun, Leo moon, but the new moon of the cycle was in the 3rd degree of Taurus, okay? And if I go to the new moon before that, it was Aries, and then here's the new moon before that in Pisces. And this we can tell is a solar eclipse because it's right at the node. Not only that, but it's so close to the node that we can tell this is a total solar eclipse. The closer the moon and the sun align to those intersection points, the more of a total eclipse it is, okay? So there's that one. The week after, there was a lunar eclipse, and now we're looking at March 8th, 9 days after the Standing Rock Drive. By the way, the solar eclipse in Pisces was February 23rd. Keep that date in mind. All right, lunar eclipse on March 8th, very partial lunar eclipse. And then we have to go through new moons. There's the Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, and here we go again. Look how close that is to the nodes.
Wow.
Perfect. And very close to this is going to say S2, but this is this bright star, Regulus, the heart of the lion. So the total Regulus solar eclipse that came around August 17th, 1868, not so long.
Wow.
Birth chart, yeah?
That's crazy because there's going to be a conjunction, an eclipse on Regulus next year, dude.
You said it, man. And so 2016, here's today, November 1st, 2016. And the next solar eclipse that we have will be right here on February 26, 17. Only 3 calendar dates different. Not as strong as that one that we saw in 1868, which was right at the node. But this is pretty dang close, okay? And then August 21st, 2017, right there at Regulus once again. And another thing I could share quickly before I look at those eclipses further, like I'm just going to go from this time. The nodes also move, and they have a typically retrograde or backwards through the signs of the zodiac over 18.6 years, okay? So if I play this just by years, see how they move. And it's going to take 9 years for there to be a reversal, aka south node at the north node at the south node, and 18 years for them to come back around again. It's a very important cycle in astrology that not all people honor, but it's awesome. And it also brings the eclipses around again. So eclipses happen in these 18-year families called SARs. There's other things, I don't want to get too deep into it now, but I do want to show that this year of 1868, this is where that total solar eclipse was, February 23rd, 1868. We can actually look to where it was on the globe. And this wasn't seen, Standing Rock's up here, right, in North America. This is like all of South America. Strongest one was right here at the edge of Brazil, and then into Africa. And I'm not going to say, well, somehow this is connected to Standing Rock, but I'm not going to say it's not either. And I won't be surprised if we'll see these things coming in. And there's also an eclipse work where you project the furthest out point. It's called the sunrise point, and you can draw a line straight up and down. And so I'll look forward to doing that, like on Google Earth or something, and seeing how close that gets to Standing Rock. We'll see if maybe something about these nations are coming in to participate with this energy. And I will do the same thing for the August 18th, 1868 total solar eclipse and see where that was seen. And it looks like it was centered on Southeast Asia here. Yeah. And again, not visible in Standing Rock. The lunar eclipses would have been. But these energies might show themselves. I haven't yet done the research to see, and I think it's going to present itself. But very importantly right now, we can just look. February 23rd and August 18th, and next year in 2017, February 26th and August 21st. And that was the first thing in my like current kind of obsessed eclipse research where I am with my study right now, where I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Totally aligning to the Standing Rock eclipses.
Yeah.
So one more thing I want to share, and then I'll let you close us out, Gary, is that these eclipses live in families. They're called serocycles. And if I do this prenatal solar eclipse for Standing Rock, February 23rd, 1868, I can see that it's in this cycle marked 128. And we can see where the cycle itself was born. They come around for about 1,280 years, repeating every 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours.
And they wrap themselves around the earth twice like a serpent.
Right, and so these do come to the States. In fact, look at 1994, and then here is 2012 it came in, okay? So especially when we look at the next ones next year, we're going to see a line going right across the States. But I want to show you that the next time, because it's 18 years later, that this one showed up was 1868. And, sorry, that's Standing Rock. It was 1886, okay? So these two eclipses in February and March of 1868 came around again in 1886. They would have been further along in the zodiac. I think I'll share that in a full another episode. But there's also something called the Metonic cycle with the eclipses, where sometimes they repeat 19 years in the same degrees. And I actually haven't looked at this yet, Gary, but I'm going to run 1887 here and see, right, look, February 22nd, right? So this eclipse, though, it belongs to what's called a different family, and I know this is pretty far out if you haven't done eclipse research, and I promise I'll bring more of this down to earth in a future episode. But this eclipse in 1887, okay, so we look again in 1868, and here was that February eclipse. It was the what's called prenatal solar eclipse for the Standing Rock chart. And then if I go to 1887, we will see that there was an eclipse basically in that exact same place, okay? So 4 degrees Pisces in February 22nd, 1887, and then it was, what, 4 1/4 degrees Pisces in 1868. Now this is very important because in February 1887, was the Dawes Act. And I'm not sure if I have a window up or maybe we want to speak about that later. But that was basically when the government now divided this land that had been ceded to the nations in the Fort Laramie Treaty that we're looking at this chart for, and said, oh, no, like you guys, you're sharing it with your different tribes. That can't happen. You own this piece, you own this piece. And so they split this land of the reservations. This is after they took the Black Hills, and we'll talk about that later. But
stole the Black Hills.
What's that? Stole the Black Hills, yeah.
That's been decided by the United States Supreme Court.
Yes, 1877. But here with the Dawes Act, and by the way, 1877 is when it would have been what's called the nodal reversal for the Standing Rock chart. So we can look at that later. But here with the Dawes Act, they split the land into these 68-acre parcels and split them up for First Nations people, and then took the rest, stole the rest, and gave it to white settlers. Yeah. So these eclipses, there's very powerful energies when the eclipses come around and in these families, or when they eclipse the same degrees as we're seeing with the Dawes Act in 1887. I'll share more about that in another episode. And 2017, these same degrees of the zodiac will be eclipsed by our February and August eclipses next year.
Right. So does that mean that white people are gonna like do their thing again and steal from the First Nations and stuff? Not necessarily. We could do
or
it right.
You bring the gold out of the shadow, right?
Exactly. We could do it right this time, finally. You know, and I mean, you watch these. That's the thing about fate and free will. I mean, it's fated that we're going to have this confrontation this coming year. It was bound to happen because whenever you have a moment in time, right, whether it be a birth of a human or a birth of a treaty, mathematics tells you when all the other interactions are going to happen to that. It's simple mathematics. They're going to happen. The planets are going to align to that, and you've shared with us some of the reasons why and how. Those eclipses were bound to happen back in those same degrees this year. There's nothing we could do about that. That's fate. The free will part comes around, and what are you going to do about it?
Hmm.
We're going to have this resurfacing of this. Maybe we could finally get it right.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, and
know?
this is where we're talking predictive versus productive. I mean, when we sit in counseling with folks, I don't want to speak for Gary, but I can because he's counseled me, you know, and when I work with people and it's like, hey, this energy's coming around. And by the way, it's just like that thing 9 years ago, kind of. Remember that? What happened? Oh,
Yeah.
this is real.
Yeah.
Surprising. Every time astrology surprises me. That kind of thing is coming around. Now that you know, how do you want to align your intentions with the available energetics so you are consciously participating with the initiation rather than just having it happen to you, or even worse, missing it all together? So here's the deal, folks. We are consciously dancing. We are tuned in. You care about Standing Rock, or you wouldn't be watching two weird people on the other sides of the Americas rapping about planets right now. And it's happening. We're alive in this. We are not missing the opportunity. Now, how are we going to use it rather than be used? And what can you, and what can I, and what can Gary, and what can Jupiter and Saturn do about this? So, and what about the nodes? All right. Well, again, we set the course for like a 30-minute episode. It's got to be about 80 minutes in or something. It's why I love you, brother. You are a bird of a similar feather to me. Our birds can
Likewise. Likewise. Love you, man.
Yeah, and you too. And thanks again, everyone, for watching. Please.
And love you, brothers and sisters of the Lakota Nation. And Godspeed to you.
And we love you, water and life.
Yes.
And people out there, if you want to contribute, if you want to add a piece, please leave a comment. If you want.
Hey, guess what? You're never going to believe you hear me saying this, but I love you, Hillary Clinton. God bless you, and do right by these people, please, in the name of all that is holy.
Wow. I'm just going to say, okay, what he said on that one. All right. I love you, bro. We love you, people. Please comment, leave notes if you want to learn more about a thing, if you want to contribute, if you want to help direct people in a way that they can share and contribute. You know, that's what this stream is for. So thanks again for tuning in. And next time, we will tune in to the magical Mercury, the goddess, and to the carrier of the sacred sword, Mars, as we honor the water protectors and water as life. Thank you. We love you. See you in space.